Watch how easy it is to transform your existing countertops with Leggari products. We saved these homeowners $17,000 by installing 4 Leggari Stone Kits versus actual granite countertops, and the outcome is amazing. We use kit number 2 from Leggari.com to create this look. In this video, we're going to show you everything you need to know to transform any existing surface in your home or business. Now let's get started.
Okay, I'm gonna mix up 2 primers at a time for this project. Depending on the surface you're going over, you may not need as much primer. Some surfaces actually need more primer because they're more porous. For instance, concrete, some tile because it has grout or has been grinded need more. We're just going over Formica. We're gonna start with 2. So I'm just gonna double it up. So we're gonna shake the part A and the part B of both of these kits. We're gonna pour the part A in first. And then just like it mentions on the label, we're going to shake both parts. We're going to blend them together and then mix 2 ounces of water. Now, the 2 ounces is per kit. So if I'm mixing one of these, I only need 2 ounces. So since I'm doing 2 kits, I have 4 ounces. Now we're going to pour in the part B. And we actually like to pour the water into the part B container to get a lot of that pigment out. So I'm going to pour a couple ounces in this part B. A little bit in this one. Then we're just, make sure the lids are on good. We're just going to mix these up just for a few seconds. Just to get a lot of that pigment out. Now we'll pour the water in the mix. I'm going to start out with 2 of these kits. We have 4 because we're doing 4 Leggari Stone kits. And then after this kit, if he's running out, I'll just mix 1 at a time after that. So now I'll just grab a standard stir stick and we'll just mix that up for a couple minutes. You can use a drill at a low RPM speed, but the primers and the top coats, they mix so easily that you don't really need a drill. I'm just scraping the sides and the bottom constantly. All right, now you can see it's a nice, consistent black color, and it's going to get even darker as it sets up on these counters. So now that's ready. I'll get this to Tyler, and we'll start moving.
So all I really need for applying the primer, gloves, 3/8 snap roller, make sure we de-shed it, and I'll go through that with you guys. A roller tray. For smaller projects, obviously this is a big project, so I'm going to be able to put it down a lot faster if I just dump out beads. So I'm going to be doing that. But typical counters, 50 square feet, stuff like that, use a roller tray, makes it really nice, really easy to get it even everywhere. So we're not going to use that. First thing I want to do, de-shed the roller. So we're going to just use painter's tape. And then we just roll that on there, and that's going to remove any loose hairs. All right, so I'll put my gloves on here. And this goes really far, so if you are pouring beads out, just start small. We can always add more. We don't want to have to like scrape it off the counter and move it somewhere else. Pour out a little extra here because it will take a second for the roller to get all the way soaked up. And then we're just going to cross roll this whole section here. You can see how faster it goes instead of dipping and rolling. So if you guys are going over like a really porous surface like cement, pouring the beads out, they're gonna soak in right away. So we recommend using a roller tray on that, but for mica stuff like this, it's just so much faster pouring your beads out. Hit our edges now. We just don't want any thick edges, thick roller lines, so this is all good. It's always good to just kind of double check, make sure you don't have any thick spots. So you can see how small a bead you really need. This stuff goes really, really far. And we're just gonna continue this process until all these counters are coated. A few things about the primer, like if you're going over, say, a white counter with a black Leggari kit, you're gonna have black primer, sometimes on your faces. You'll wanna do 2 coats. So the biggest thing is to make sure your edges are as white or whatever color primer you have is as solid of that color as you can get them. And usually going over a light counter with a dark primer, 2 coats is plenty, and the same with a dark counter with a light primer. So just keep that in mind. And these are fast cure primers, so once they're rolled out, they're gonna dry really quick. Like you can see the top is already drying in spots, and we'll be putting a fan on this when we're done. That way we can tape our edges a lot faster also. But you typically want to wait about 45 minutes to an hour before you apply the epoxy. And you don't want to wait past about 2 hours of having your primer down before you put your epoxy on. So if you're gonna prime, you want to make sure you epoxy the same day. And if you don't, you're gonna want to sand that primer a little bit with probably 220 grit, or you can do like a denatured alcohol wipe and kind of get it sticky right before you apply the epoxy. But it's always best to apply your epoxy within that 1 to 2 hour time frame of applying it. So you guys will see us tape these edges. When it's still sticky, not all the way dry, it's not gonna pull the primer off. And we're able to do that because it's a specialty primer designed to chemically bond to the surface, and it's gonna dry underneath that tape. So we'll tape these counters once these edges are dry, and we won't have any issues with pulling the primer off when we go to pull the tape off. All right, so counters are done. What I'm gonna do now is around like the sinks and anywhere where there's bare MDF, we're gonna prime this also. So I'm gonna prime the edge, prime the underneath a little bit. And then another thing, if you guys are doing your primer and you have spots that are kind of separating on the primer, maybe there's some contamination there, some leftover silicone, something like that, let the primer set up and then re-roll those spots and it'll help fill them in. So give it about 10 minutes, come back, hit that spot and it'll get sticky. The primer will start to get sticky and they won't separate again. So don't worry if you see those, keep going, come back, hit them. But you always want to do your raw edges last because you're going to wind up getting some wood dust in your roller. So we always like to do these last, but this will help seal this wood up just in case any water does get down in there. And then you can even kind of go under those as well. And then just check for thick edges on the top here if you have any. You want to roll those out. And we'll also hit this one too. So that's how you apply the primer. It's fast, it's easy, and it's gonna dry fast, making your project go quicker. You don't have to wait as long before you can apply your epoxy or tape your edges if you're doing a Leggari Stone Kit.
Now, while Tyler's finishing up on the primer, I'm gonna get everything ready for these 4 Leggari Stone Kits. Now, each kit has its own set of metallics. So each set has 5 bags in this kit. So what we're going to do is the first thing I want to do is actually pour out all the clear epoxy into these buckets and get them emptied out. It's going to be best if I get them emptied out in here because it takes a little bit for them to drip. So I've actually set up 4 buckets for the 4 kits and I have some 5-gallon stir sticks. So what we'll do is grab the Part A's. We'll just take the lids off, and we're just going to let them drip for a little bit. Now, if you pour too quickly, like I'm doing, sometimes the epoxy can get stuck in these handles. So in a minute, I'll just tip them up for a few seconds and then tip them back over just to get as much resin as we can out of those handles. But these containers are better than the alternative, which is, cans like paint cans that are very annoying to pour out of. They're very messy. These are easy pour containers. I'm going to tilt these up for a few seconds. And then I'll actually hold them up a little bit. And what I'm waiting for is for all of this epoxy, the drips, and the runs, I want all the runs to turn into drips. So right now I see a bunch of little streams coming out of these containers. I'm just waiting for them to start to drip. Pretty much getting there, so I'm good with that. And again, you can leave these upside down for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, completely up to you. One thing I like to have at every mixing station is a rag and a bottle with some denatured alcohol. It's nice to just keep your gloves clean, the buckets clean, as much of the workspace clean as possible, especially when you're mixing more than one kit. You watch, it's gonna look like a disaster around here. Now, that's part of the fun of these kits, but you wanna minimize the mess and you wanna ruin the least amount of clothing as possible. But like I always say, you should definitely mentally prepare to ruin the clothes you're wearing, because why not? All right, now I have 4 different containers that have 2 gallons in them. And because our epoxy is a 2-to-1, all of these buckets have an accompanying part B, which is the hardener. So this is what it looks like. This is the best way to set up your mixing station. Just get all the part A dumped out into these buckets first. And now what I'm going to do, because I only want to mix 1 Leggari Stone Kit at a time, I'm just going to set 3 of these aside. Obviously, if you're setting them aside, you want to be conscious of where they're at. You don't want to be tripping over them. That would definitely be a disaster. Let me show you what we have set up in this mixing station, because we're not going to quite mix yet until we have all of the tape on the primer and it's actually ready to go. But I want to show you what we've done. Because I don't like getting metallics in the air, if you don't have the luxury of doing this outside or if it's really windy, obviously we want you to wear a respirator because you don't want to breathe any type of dust, but especially metallics. So we've actually just set up a vacuum, a shop vac, so when I'm pouring the metallics into 5-gallon buckets, it'll just kind of go up in the vacuum. And the other thing I've done is I've taken a 5-quart container and I've turned it upside down so that when I'm pouring my metallics into smaller containers, it's not all the way down here and the vacuum can't get to it. So I'm just using this as a pedestal so that when I pour my metallics in and I'm mixing them, I can do it right in front of this vacuum and it'll just suck it up into the vacuum. I recommend using some sort of a shop vac or some sort of a vacuum where you have the filter on it and also the bags. You can get the bags for those vacuums as well. We recommend using both. So we're pretty much set up. I have the denatured alcohol, all of the containers, all of my part A's are poured out now. We're just waiting to get ready to rock. And so I'll show you that after we're done taping.
So it's time to tape our edges. We're going to be using painter's tape. It's the best tape to use. It's going to create a really good bond. These are really sticky, but again, like I said before, we can tape onto these without letting them dry all the way like a lot of paints and stuff. This is not going to pull off. So we're going to tape about half onto the edge and about half above the counter. That's going to create that dam, so when we do our pours, it's going to hold everything there, and then when it sets up, we'll pull that tape, and edges are going to look absolutely beautiful without even touching them. So I'm going to do the first layer, and then Tim's going to come back and do the second layer. We like to do 2 layers of tape. And I like to pull it out and then twist it, and then I can kind of judge, put it where I need it. All right, so Tim's got the second row on here. So what I'm gonna do is we really wanna press this down nice and tight. Get a good seam, a good seal here. Get our corners good, and then we like to pinch our corners in just a tad bit. That'll make it a little bit tighter. And you'll notice Tim's going about the same exact height, so he's trying to keep it the same height as mine and just double layering it. So that's how we tape off the edges. So we'll continue that process until all the counters are taped off, and then we can start mixing up the Leggari Stone Kit. So if you guys have spots where the tape's kind of lipping out, just press into your corner a little bit on that rounded edge, just a tad bit. That'll help straighten that out a little. Like here, it's just kind of lipping out a lot. Just gonna push that into the top just a tad bit on that corner. And then whenever you are taping, you know, 1/2-inch pieces or like that MDF board that we're coating, we want to fold the tape underneath as well. And I'll kind of show you what that looks like. It's really rough. We're not going to get a tight seal there. So we're going to tape on the top and then leave some to fold underneath the bottom here. Always crease in them corners before you move on. And then we just fold it under. Hold your corner tight and just push down there until you break a gap in it. And that'll help seal up these edges. All right, guys, this is what it looks like when you're ready to start mixing your Leggari Stone Kit. All the edges are taped, the sinks are taped off. We pressed it down really good, creased all our corners. And yeah, so this is how it looks. We're ready to go.
Okay guys, everything's taped off. Now we're going to mix our first Leggari Stone Kit. So I'm going to explain a little bit of the process, and then I'm going to have to turn on the vacuum so that it can be sucking up the metallics that are in the air. And I have a mask here just in case it's not picking up enough of it. I just don't want to be breathing metallics. But again, you want to start with a bucket with the 2 gallons of Part A that we already put in a bucket. And then of course, the hardener. And I just want to bring in the metallics for one kit. So this is Leggari Stone Kit number 2. I have 3 adamantiums, a dark mercury, and a midnight pearl. So what I'm going to do is mix up this resin in the bucket really well, and then I will actually dump it into a new bucket and mix it again. That'll ensure that we have no soft spots on the counter. Once the epoxy is thoroughly mixed up, that's when I will actually separate 2 containers for the midnight pearl and the dark mercury. And I'm gonna pour out about 60 to 65 ounces, basically about 2 quarts of clear resin, and then I'm gonna add the powder to that. Then I'm just going to dump the adamantium in the big container. So I'm explaining it, but then you'll see it in a minute. And whenever I mess with metallics, I'm going to be doing it near the vacuum so that it can be obviously pulling those metallics out of the air. We're going to be using a little bit of white Rust-Oleum spray paint. This is gloss protective enamel. This is just white. So I'll have these ready. I'm also going to spray these into 3 of the containers when we start mixing up all the colors. And then I'm going to hand it to Tyler, and we're going to switch to another camera so that you can actually see me mixing the whole time while he's laying out the pattern over there. So you'll be able to see both simultaneously on the screen and kind of see how it works to do multiple kits. All right, let's get going. The Part B pours out much faster. It's much more fluid. Now it's important that you don't leave these buckets mixed up once you've mixed them and just sitting in the bucket for a long time. You'll see that I'm going to get it to Tyler, and he's going to immediately start pouring it out on the counter. You don't want it sitting in the bucket, because if it sits in the bucket for a long time, it'll actually start setting up. The other thing is I'm going to be using a large drill paddle for the big bucket and a smaller one for the smaller mixing containers. I'm not worried about inducing any air into this mix. Our resin is designed to release bubbles from the mixture, so I'm going to be inducing lots of air into this thing, but I want to mix it quickly, so I'm not really worried about that. Okay, now I'm going to pour this container. I've mixed it for about a minute, minute 15, maybe a minute and a half. Just going to dump it into a brand new container. Scrape the sides and mix it again for about another 30 seconds at high speed. Now this bucket that I mixed in very first, this is now garbage. So I'm going to set that over here. That is now a garbage bucket. I'm going to mix this for about 30 more seconds. I like spinning off the drills into the buckets so it's not just dripping everywhere for a long time. Now, like I mentioned before, I'm going to pour about 64 ounces into each of these containers. Then I'm going to add the metallics and start mixing. So this is where I'm going to turn the vacuum on. It's going to get kind of loud. And one thing is when you're mixing these smaller containers, don't worry too much about contaminating each color. It's not really going to affect if you've just dipped it in and you let most of it drip off the container. So let's turn the vacuum on. All right, guys, as you can see, that was a success. So now I'm going to set up 5 more of these 2.5 quart containers. And now we're going to get ready to make our batches for the actual pour. Tyler's going to be dumping it out, and we're just going to get everything ready. So this kit, we actually like having white spray paint. So what we're going to do is use our white spray paint. Obviously, you can wear a mask, you can turn the vacuum back on, you can do this part outside. But we want to put quite a bit of spray paint in the bottom of these. So we're just going to cover it with a rag and let it drip down the side of the container. We want 3 of these containers with quite a bit of white spray paint on the bottom. And it just has a beautiful effect at the very end of the install. All right, now I have 3 of these with the white spray paint in the bottom, and then 2 with nothing. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to pour, and I want to get these close because I'm going to make a mess here. Messes are okay. Just happy little accidents, right? Little bit in the bottom of every one. I want adamantium in the bottom of every container. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some dark mercury, some midnight pearl. Going to dump those in together. I'm gonna pour in some more adamantium. I'm gonna take some of that dark mercury and I'm just gonna pour through the middle. I'm going to do the same thing with the Midnight Pearl. But I want to leave some Midnight Pearl left because in the top of two of these, the ones that don't have white, I want some Midnight Pearl in the top. So now I'm gonna leave the rest of this Midnight Pearl. So now I'm gonna pretty much disperse the rest of this into these containers. I'm gonna do another ribbon of the dark mercury. And these containers are going to be starting to get really full because we didn't use 2 quarts as a base coat of clear. And you don't have to, you can also do it like this. But if you don't do that base coat, obviously you'll have extra material you need to kind of fit in these containers. So I'm going to leave these last 2 pretty full so I can do the Midnight Pearl in them. If you want, you can scrape out the container. I always like to. And it's all right to scrape the side of this container because we already mixed it twice. So there's going to be no soft spots in this container. Now, I'm going to take Midnight Pearl. I'm going to disperse it, split it up between these 2. Now, don't stress out too much about this part, guys. This is easy. You almost can't screw this up. This is just the way we did this kit, and we want to try to mimic it. So now, we don't want these sitting in the bucket forever. I'm going to get them to Tyler. He's going to explain how to dump them out. And while he's dumping these out, I'm just going to do this 3 more times. So we have 1 Leggari Stone Kit done, ready to go for Tyler. I'm going to do this exact same thing again 3 more times. And the reason why the countertops will look similar no matter where he pours them is because I'm going to make every batch pretty close to the same.
All right, so I'm gonna go, since Tim's gonna be mixing the background, I'm not gonna be able to talk through the whole video, so I'm just gonna kind of walk through the process real quick, and then you guys will just see me do it. But first, if you guys wanna map out your kitchen, I kind of did right here on this piece of paper. So I drew it up, kind of created the vein pattern that I wanna follow, and then all I did was take a paint stick, and I just ran it on there, and you can kind of see the patterns. So this will give me kind of something to follow. Since it's such a big area, and it works great for smaller counters too. You can kind of get the exact pattern you're looking for. So yeah, simple way to do that. A few other things as I'm pouring out, I want to make sure I know what colors are going where. Like if I get a bunch of black coming out, right, and I got a bunch of black in that area, I might want to jump to a different spot in the counter where maybe there's not a lot of black or not a lot of white. So I'm constantly watching what colors are coming out and where I'm putting them out throughout the counter. Also, I don't want to pour big piles right next to the tape. So I kind of slow the bead down there next to the tape. And I like to pour smaller beads. Again, it's kind of hard when we have full buckets, but if you pour a big pile out, big bead, it's going to level out a lot. It's not going to be as like a fracture vein or more of a vein pattern. So try to do the beads a little smaller, and we can always go back and add to them. And that's about it. I just want to get these dumped out as fast as I can, because once they're dumped out of the bucket, it's going to give us a lot more time to get the rest of them dumped out. The longer they sit in that bucket, the faster they're going to heat up, and then they will get to the point where you can't use the product. So I want to go around, get it dumped out as fast as I can, and that's kind of what we're going to do. All right, we're on our last bucket, and I want some material to get some more white throughout the counters. Like you can see some of these where I had Tim spray some white spray paint into the bottom of the cups. We want to get more of those white fracture veins out here. So we're going to separate a little bit out in some smaller containers. That way I have more control over it. And then I'll just take the leftover in the big bucket and kind of just go out through the counter. It's all leveled out and filled, but we're going to put the rest of it on the counter in just different spots. No point in wasting it. So that's what I'm going to do here. So when you spray the spray paint on the top, that first pour is going to be relatively white. So I'll kind of give it a little bit of a shake there. And then I'm just going to start following some of these patterns that we have out here. And if the white's not coming out, just give it a second, or you can even spray a little more. You can see the little bit of white, really cool effects it's going to put on these tops. All right, now that everything's done, dialed in, I'm gonna spray the isopropyl, small to medium drops. I'm gonna barely pull the trigger. We're gonna kind of spritz that on the surface. It's gonna give us some cells where a lot of that white spray paint is. And then about 5-10 minutes after that, we're just gonna mist the surface with denatured alcohol, and it's gonna make it lay out glass smooth. So you always wanna kind of test it. Make sure it's spraying good. And then we're just gonna barely pull the trigger and hit the surface. So you can see what it does. It kind of creates some crater little cell looks in these white veins. So before I spray the denatured, if you have too much white in there, you can always blend that in by just running your finger through it. So we're just going to kind of blend this in. I want to kind of follow the pattern that we have here, but we're just going to break that up just a little bit, just so there's not so much concentrated white in these spots. That's it, guys. This is cool, so we'll leave that. And then we're just gonna mist it now. We're not gonna barely press the trigger. We want a full mist on here. And this will pop any of those bubbles from doing so many different layers on it. So we're just gonna go around all the tops. Just spray directly on it. You can see I sprayed this spot like a couple minutes ago. It's already glassed over. Just immediately pops any of those bubbles that are left in there. All right, so if you guys see bubbles or anything else, you can hit it again with denatured alcohol, do another mist on it. But now it's basically time to pull the tape. An easy way to tell, right? This is a big kitchen, so it took us a little while to put it all down. So if you pull this back, see how it's just barely moving? You might not even be able to pick it up. But you want to pull it when it's not moving really fast. If it starts running down really easy and fast, it's too soon. You just want to make sure you're not waiting too long, right, to where it doesn't run. But this is about the perfect time. So we're gonna pull all this tape, and it's gonna slowly start running down the edge, and then we'll come back and I'll brush it in with my hand, because we wanna slick that whole edge off with epoxy so it can flow over evenly. Notice how it's not pulling any primer off. That primer's chemically adhered to the counter surface, even though we went on it when it was still tacky and not all the way dry. Guys, as long as you do a solid strip of tape, it shouldn't tear on you, and you can do that. If you guys do a bunch of little pieces, you're gonna wanna be more careful on it. Last thing we wanna do is drop tape in the finished top here. Kind of hear it dripping now. Maybe been 5 minutes and you can already see the edges are running down. So we'll just let those continuously drip. We'll keep pulling tape. Once we get the tape done, we'll come back, rub all that resin, get the whole edges coated, and then it'll flow over nice and evenly. All right, so the next thing, we want to get rid of all this surface tension on the faces. And I'm just gonna run my hand and just get this whole edge coated with epoxy. Once we do this, it'll be able to flow over evenly. And don't worry about screwing your design up. It's still gonna drip for another half hour, up to an hour and a half, depending on how long it took you guys to apply it, the temperatures in the room. And then if you have spots that are almost coated all the way, you don't have to hit the whole edge. You can just brush in any spots that are missing epoxy. We just want to make sure everything's nice and coated. Like right here, I would just do the bottom edge, not hit the whole thing. So I have enough here, I can brush that in, but if you guys, like, say you have a spot that maybe is really thin, it's not flowing over, you need some resin there, you can take your leftover epoxy cups and you can put it on there to get it slicked off. Again, I didn't need it, but just to kind of show you guys, if you maybe waited too long and you have some spots that aren't really flowing, you can put it on there just like that. All right, so we'll go where I started, and you'll see it's already down to the bottom almost. You see kind of the messed up spots from rubbing it in. It's already flowed over so much to the bottom. I come over here, you can see our designs are coming right down the face, right from the top. Creates that real natural look. And the cool part about these stone kits is if you have a vein that's coming into an edge crooked, it'll go down that face crooked as well, instead of straight up and down like a typical epoxy countertop would, because it's set up and it's sticky. It's keeping that exact shape as it rolls over the face, so it creates a really cool effect. So we'll just kind of baby these for a little bit, make sure everything's flowing over good. If there's any spots we need to hit, we'll hit them. We'll do that for maybe the next 15-20 minutes, make sure they're dialed. And then the last thing is I'll show you guys how to scrape the drips off when it's time. I'm gonna show you guys how to scrape the drips. They're still gonna drip for maybe another half an hour, maybe an hour. But it is setting up, so I like to use something sharp and skinny, like a putty knife. If you use a paint stick, it'll build up on that paint stick and it'll wind up putting more resin back on that bottom edge. So I just take the scraper and kind of just shave that off. And it won't build up and put it back on the top. And keep doing that. So every I don't know, 30 feet, 20 feet, I'll clean it off. So the last thing, if you have any spots on your faces that maybe look like a drip mark or anything, you can brush that in before it sets up too much. But I have a spot here that I can see the primer on the corner, barely. So all I'm gonna do is take a paintbrush, dip it in the floor here where it's dripped off. I'm just gonna add a little bit right here. Now you want to do this before it sets up too much, because again, this is still going to level out, drip off a little bit. You can see we just scraped it, it's still dripping a little. So that'll all level out. So you want to make sure you hit those edges anywhere that you want sooner than later. Like another spot over here, it just kind of looks like a run mark. It's not terrible, but we can just brush that in. There you have it, guys. That's how easy it is to install 4 Leggari Stone Kits. And tomorrow, we're going to show you how simple it is to apply the matte urethane and give it that natural stone finish.
All right, we're gonna mix up the matte WB urethane for these counters behind me. We're gonna mix up 2 kits at a time. Now, depending on the substrate you're going over, it can go anywhere from 50 to 100 square feet. So we're going to mix up 2 of these kits, again, at a time, and then if we need more, we'll mix up 1 kit at a time after that. We're not going to use the grit additive, and so we're going to mix both part A's and part B's into this mixing container. It's gonna be really full, and then I'm going to add 4 ounces of water because I'm doing 2 kits. So the first thing we want to do is make sure the lids are on snug, and we'll just mix both of these a little bit, the part A's and the part B's. Just a little bit, and then just like the labels say, must mix with part A. Once mixed, blend in 2 ounces of clean water. So 2 ounces per kit. If you're just using 1 kit, you only need 2 ounces. Because I'm doing 2 kits, I'm gonna have 4 ounces. And I like to pour the water into the part A's. And actually, I misjudged this container. I'm gonna grab a 2.5 quart container. This is only a 1 quart container. So I will grab a 2.5 quart container and I will dump this into that real quick. Okay, just gonna pour it into this 5 quart container. Now I'm gonna pour the part B's in. And I'm going to pour the part A into the part B's as well, just to get a little bit more of it out. Now we have our water in here. We've rinsed out the part A and the part B containers. Just stir this for a few minutes. You can use a small drill at low RPM. This stuff mixes so easy. It's a water-based product. You can't hardly smell it. It has a slight odor to it, but it's nothing like the solvent-based urethane top coats. This is new waterborne technology. So now we'll begin to add our water. I'm going to be scraping the bottoms and the sides a lot while I'm mixing this. You always want to make sure you have all of the material mixed up really well. You don't want any part A or part B on the sides of the container or on the walls. All right, now this is mixed up. We'll get this to Tyler and he'll show you how to apply it.
So before I start applying, I'll kind of walk you through what we've done. So we finished the counters late last night. We came here this morning. It's still a little too soft to sand some of these drips off. So I took a razor blade, cut the majority of them off. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna do our first coat of top coat now, and then come back tomorrow, sand these edges, get them nice and flat and smooth off, and then we'll apply the second coat. That way we don't have to wait. The cool thing about the urethanes is we can apply the first coat, and once it goes clear, about an hour, hour and a half maybe, you can apply your second coat. You don't have to wait 24 hours. But in this case, we're just gonna get the first coat on, head out, come back the next day, buzz, clean up our edges, make these look nice and smooth, and then we'll apply the second coat because it is still within that 24-hour window. So whenever you do a top coat or something that goes past 24 hours, you really wanna scuff that up with like 220 grit, 320 grit sandpaper. When you're doing urethanes, you never wanna sand the surfaces with heavier grit than 220. So always use that fine grit when sanding. And then the other thing you'll notice, we picked up all the plastic, took off all the tape, got everything cleaned up because the urethanes aren't gonna drip and run off the edge. So all we came back and did was just run a nice strip of blue tape everywhere that my roller might touch a finished edge or cabinets or something. This is awesome because when we're done, we can pull that clean tape and we're basically done. We don't have to pick up all the plastic or come back the next day. So for contractors, it's awesome. You can just clean up your mess, put that piece of tape on there to cover anything that you don't want the roller to touch, and then right when you're done applying it, you can pull that tape off and you're pretty much cleaned up, ready to go. So we'll get started here. I'm gonna not be setting my roller tray on the epoxy because it is still kind of fresh since we finished it late last night. So I'm gonna just roll this cart around, dip and roll from here, and then apply it to the top. So I always like to take a second, soak this roller up, kind of rub that into there, the urethane. Now when applying the urethane, you want to do it in sections. I don't want to try to do a big span at a time. So I'm just going to be hitting about 3-foot sections at a time, getting the top rolled out, and then I do my edges. And you can see how thin it goes on. So I always like to work fast when I'm rolling the top out. Hit all my corners, my edges. Now you don't want your roller sliding, you want it to roll. So you might have to just be really light on your corners, on your edges, so that roller can roll and not kind of drag across the surface. So once we do our faces, we want to get that roller flattened off, and we're just going to back roll it. Nice and light, overlapping a little bit. We just want to make sure there's no thick roller edges. And it's always good to get at different angles and look, make sure everything's been hit, no missed spots, and then we can move on, because you don't want to go back after you've started another section and hit the previous spot. Maybe you saw an imperfection or a missed spot. You want to make sure you get those before you move on. Notice I'm getting any chunks that I see out of the urethane. And again, you can see it kind of indents my roller. So I don't want to immediately start my back roll until I roll that out, get that roller flat. So if you guys sand your counters to get a matte finish, you're definitely going to want to try this product. It basically eliminates that. And you can see how fast it's applied. This would take forever to sand these down and create that matte finish. And this is just such a fast way to do it. And it adds a lot of durability to these counters. So this is the process, guys. We just kind of repeat this over and over. And then maybe when we get down here where we kind of got to butt up to different areas, I'll kind of explain the easiest way to do that. But I'm going to just continue this process until we get to an area where I think there's something I should explain or tell you an easy way how to do that. So we'll just finish these off and keep going. All right, so it's the next day after we applied that first layer of the matte urethane. And like I said before, guys, we're gonna sand these edges down now. Typically, you'd wanna do that before you apply the urethane. We just didn't wanna wait around, so we did the first coat, and then now we're gonna do the sanding on the edges, clean these up. Whenever you're doing sanding on your edges like this, you wanna use 220 grit or higher. Never do a heavy grit because you'll wind up sanding through too much. And remember, these edges are a lot thinner than the top. So we're gonna be really careful. We're gonna go slow, use that 220 grit. And then if you guys round your bottom edges before you coat it, a lot of times you won't get this buildup on the bottom. So that's what it is. It's kind of a straight edge on the bottom, and it holds a lot of that resin and creates this lip. So when you're sanding your corners, sand the bottom edge, and that'll eliminate all this stuff right here. So I'll show you kind of how we do it to sand it. We want to move constantly and see how far we're going through, and we're just going to sand until this is nice and flat and even, and you'll kind of see what that looks like. So you can tell it's nice and flat. Got rid of everything, and you can see here, see this still needs sanded. I can still see a different color there. It's almost like it's darker. So we're looking to get that whole surface even, and then when we're done sanding, we'll just clean the counters, apply that second coat, and since it's matte, you're not gonna tell that we sanded this after the first coat. All right, so it's round two. We're gonna do that second coat of the urethane. We sanded these edges, guys. We kind of showed you that. We went through, cleaned all the counters, made sure all the dust is off them, got them really clean, just used a rag and water. So why we're doing a second coat is if you look at the top, sometimes when the light hits it, you can see small little glossy spots. And again, you got to get it the right angle. Like if you just walk in, look at this kitchen, it looks like the whole thing's a matte finish, looks absolutely beautiful, but we're gonna do that second layer just to get rid of any of those small little dots that are glossy. And we're gonna apply it the same exact way. So dip and roll, small sections, and again, just the same exact way as we did the first coat. And it's gonna probably go a little bit farther on this coat. but just as easy, just as fast. So I'll kind of show you just starting out, and then we'll just finish the rest of these tops. So again, same roller, 3/8 snap roller. We've de-shedded it, removed all the loose hairs. Now I'm just gonna soak this up. Always take a second, make sure we get that roller soaked up before we start. And then same process, just roll down the middle, and then we're gonna cross roll that. Leggari Stone Kits are changing the way countertops are coated by eliminating any artistic touch needed. Simply mix and pour out of the bucket in random patterns, and you'll create a natural finish that mimics designer stone patterns and effects. Leggari Products has manufactured user-friendly proprietary coatings for years, only available at leggari.com. With zero VOCs, American-made, and certified industrial-grade products. There's thousands of successful installs from professionals, beginners, and first-time users from all around the world. You probably walked on it or sat by it without even knowing its natural look is actually epoxy. Go to leggari.com and check out our countertop kit options, or maybe you want to buy single items from the online epoxy superstore. Don't worry, if you're a contractor, we have a section for you too. Simply sign up and enjoy the benefits. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of the new projects coming up.